Let's say we wanted to remove one of these trees. I go ahead and just grab the spot healing brush tool, make a new layer, put sample on all layers, and click, right? Oh, well, maybe a couple of clicks, right? No, well, it's not like a whole lot better. What if I just move it around? Well, maybe if I drag it, now I have two trees. So then I go over to the healing brush tool. I'm like, okay, job for the healing brush tool. All right, I got to alt click first. Not a problem though. Now I can, oh, well, I clicked in the wrong place. Maybe if I kind of paint, no, so let me just, oh, I'm sampling the current layer. I'll do all layers. And then I keep clicking and painting and it's just like leaving this weird smudge. And now I'm worse off. I just noticed that the ground is wrong. And so I start trying to get the ground in and I keep misaligning it. So I paint it in, but now I've got brown spots in it. So I go back to the drawing board. Like, all right, let me go ahead and try a quick lasso tool, maybe with a polygon lasso. And then I'll just do a content aware fill. I'll go edit fill. I'll do the color adaptation. Oh, well, that's kind of worked. It's a little blurry. I lost some cloud. Not a problem. I can just come in and grab that. Do it again. Edit, fill, content aware. Oh, well, now I messed up the ground. I know that the healing brush wasn't working very well. I'll do an edit fill. This time I won't do the color adaptation because I'm getting the brown. Oh, well, nope. Without the color adaptation, it just moved it up like a stamp. So I'd be fiddling around with this for a while, and I could do things like try fuzzier brushes. I could, go in fuzzier brushes, fuzzier selections. I could go in with the quick mask mode, grab a normal brush, and then just lower the hardness and fill it in with white and try that. And then once I've got that, I can go back to the normal mode and do an edit fill again, and this time making sure to do the color adaptation, content aware, and fill it. I've still got weird lumps. Wouldn't it be nice if we had a tool that was like our content aware fill, but provided us with the same sort of immediacy and feedback that we had with our healing brush tool or our spot healing brush? Well, fortunately we have that, and it's called the patch tool. Let me go ahead and show you how that works. Just going to bring our document back in history to the way it was. And I'm going to do two things. I'm going to duplicate the layer, but I'm also going to make a new blank layer. Now, depending on the mode you have the patch tool in, you'll be able to use underlying layers or not. In the normal patch mode, you can't use underlying layers. In the content aware mode for the patch tool, you have the option to sample all layers. So let's start with normal, and we'll work on the duplicate. Now we have two options for doing this. We have source and destination. We also have transparent and diffusion. I'll show you those in a moment. So we start with the selection, and you can use the selection tool that's provided with the content aware fill. No problem whatsoever. But if you want to be more precise, you have all the same selection tools that you have available to you at all times of the day. So you could even load in selections, use the polygon lasso as shape. You can paint it in however you want to do it. And then when you switch to the patch tool, which again is just under all of your healing brush tools and above your red eye correction, now you can grab it. Now I have source. I can also do destination. Let me show you source first. As I drag along, I get an immediate preview of what's happening. So I can realign everything carefully the first time through. And when I release it, notice I get this little fuzz. Now that has to do with the amount of diffusion. Watch what happens if I crank the diffusion up to its maximum 7. It's trying to blend in the colors as much as possible by diffusing it, essentially. You know how if you get like some water on your camera lens, it has like a really bright spot? That's the light being refracted. Yeah, it's close. It's basically these blurs of color and things that come in. So if you turn off diffusion, sorry, I did not turn it off. If you turn off diffusion, you'll discover you can only get it down to 1, which leaves you back in the original dilemma. What happens if you select a little piece of it? Well, you can do it in 2 steps. 1, and then in the second step, 2. It will get rid of it, and that's about it. Notice we still have a little bit right there. Wouldn't it be nice, though, if we could have done that using perhaps a more refined content aware fill? Well, we can. Let me actually step back forward in time real quick. Or not. I may have gone too far into the past. That's fine. Let me quickly redo that. So we'll do one with the low diffusion. Notice with the low diffusion, we get this weird square cutout. So I'm going to go ahead and crank up the diffusion. And I'm just going to do it one more time, just clouds this time. That's all I'm focusing on. And now I'll do it another time. This time with a smaller selection, moving over. And now I'm just going to slide this over. And notice that mostly took care of it. We have a couple of repeats going on, but otherwise it's set. So we've got one. Let's go ahead and turn that layer off. We'll call this normal mode actually. Patch tool normal mode. Now we'll do patch tool content aware. And let's switch the modes. Now that we're in content aware mode, we have the ability to sample all layers, so we don't have to be on the same step. Let's play around with this for just a second. Oh, it complains because the target layer is hidden. Oh, indeed it is. So it does have some limitations. Just move it over and plop it down. Let me Control H to hide the selection. Notice how beautifully this worked up in the clouds, a little rough on the ground. That has to do with a slip of my mouse. I'm going to undo and Control H again. I don't think we need to have quite that much ground. All right. Control H. That looks much better. So why did this work better than the content aware? It's because we actually have the ability to control how much of the structure is being blended and how much of the color is being blended. Let me demonstrate with a new blank layer. For example, oh, and most versions of Photoshop that have the content aware fill will allow you to edit it after the fact, but in my experience, it sometimes crashes out. So let's see if it handles it. Let's say that we have a structure of 7. Let's say we have a structure of 1. Notice that it has less of an attempt at maintaining the structure of the surrounding work. We've got like this weird blur. Let's turn off color correction entirely. Oh, look at that. Let's crank it up 100%. Now it's trying to blend the two colors together more. So what we might want to do is actually have no color correction and maybe a structure of 2 or 3. And you can see how the ground changes. Now around 3, I think it's working pretty well. We do have a repeated pattern because it's keeping the structure pretty heavily. Again, here's the structure at 7. Not too much of a difference except on the ground. Notice that it tried to keep the ground from blending in as much. So in our case, a structure of 2. So, well, maybe even 1. And it seems to like it this time. Oh, because my color is 0. And there you have it. It allows you to do edits on the fly and refinements past what you'd be able to do with the standard content aware fill. That's pretty powerful. Now let's take a look at the other settings outside of content aware. And if you play with this, you'll notice that color goes up to 10, which means it tries to blend the colors together as best as possible. Structure can go up to 1. I've deselected. Structure can go up to 7. I've deselected, so it's no longer going to function. Let me step back in time a couple times. And now we'll do structure 1, color 0. And I like that quite a bit. I think I moved up too high, but without trying to maintain the structure of what was sampled at the end, we did not end up with that repeating cloud. However, this is kind of a mess, so it'd be good to go in and take care of that. So you'd want to be a little careful with it. But just the ability to control your content aware, control your content aware settings, it's a very powerful tool. Now we skipped over a couple of things in normal mode, so let me roll back. Again, normal mode means that, boom, we have to have a duplicate. And again, here it is with the content aware instead. I think it did a slightly better job, but you do have to be a little picky. So let me go back to normal mode. We have a couple of other options. We were working on source, and with source, just to show you what it can do, it allows you to preview, right? That's what we're seeing. It's moving over and blending together. If we have it set on destination instead, check this out. Oh, it's moving and blending things. Now, it's not doing a super great job, and there's actually a better tool for this. It's called the Content Aware Move tool. We'll talk about that next. But we also have the diffusion on this, which allows us, oh, I've already blown it though. Let me go back. The diffusion allows us to goof around with it a little bit more. It should blur everything over. And we can do it with a very low diffusion, just to give you an idea. And so now it's tried to maintain it to the point that we have an edge. So you do need some diffusion a lot of the time, unless you have a very careful selection. And just as a quick demonstration, switch over to the patch tool. Let's say I just have a chunk, I drop it in. Notice it's trying to maintain the texture. If we diffuse that texture instead, using the the normal patch tool, just J on your keyboard will get to that. Let's crank that diffusion up. It still seems to be doing something odd. Notice though that it is a little blurred out on it. It's trying its best. It works best with similar similar source destination. So for example, if I were to put a cloud over a cloud, I could start cleaning up the clouds. But the closer I am, the better it will be. Notice it still looks a little fakey, even with the high diffusion. With the low diffusion, it's going to be a little bit worse. We can see some strange color mal-colored stuff going in, which is interesting, but not really what we're after. So in those cases, you'd want similar to similar. So for example, let's say you had this little patch of dirt and you wanted it to be clean. We're on destination, so I'll just drop it over. There you go, it's gone instantly. Pretty sweet deal, because you can kind of use pieces and preview what it will look like going in. When you release it, we'll do the adjustments though, and you may notice that it's not something you want, so keep that in mind. All right, there's one other piece that I've been bouncing around. That's the transparent. Check this out. What just happened here? Well, I'll give you a hint. It's trying to maintain the structure and blend it in with the transparency. I find that more useful when you're working with textured objects and you're trying to preserve where you're landing. Let me get that back. I think I was on destination still. So watch what happens when you do source with transparency. Notice this strange effect. It's trying very hard to blend these unlike things together as getting this kind of ghosting. Now that can work well. Let's see if I can get it to go. If you want to maintain the textured source and destination a little bit better, notice that it does in fact keep it sharper on the transparent mode. If we were to do that with the non-transparent mode, it will start to blur out a little bit every time. So it's kind of a learn from experience type situation. I wish I could give you a little more hint on that. I will demonstrate it one more time to give you a better feel for it. But let's not make another monster. Let's go to our bumblebees. Here we go. So again, on this, I went ahead and already made a selection using the polygon lasso tool to get the honeycomb. And now we can play around with this a little bit more. Let's say we're using normal mode and we had transparent on. Watch this nightmare occur. We have a blending between the layers very heavily. So if you were on glass, for example, it would be a kind of a great thing to go for. It would try to maintain it better. Now for the bumblebee, if I turn off transparency, you can see that it tried to blend it more, but with the diffusion set as it is, it gave that weird bloom effect. And again, with a lower diffusion as compared to higher diffusion, lower diffusion, higher diffusion, you'll see that it still just doesn't quite get the effect that you want. At this point, it's time to use the content aware, so it looks beyond and tries to determine what you're really after. So let me grab another chunk, trying to match them up a little bit. And it's doing its best to blend it together. Now we could do, for example, a higher color blend, which would be good in this case, as long as it's not too high. And it will blend in. Notice now that the browns are maintained. So let's just try a slightly higher structure. And it's doing an almost but not quite passable job. So you can see that there are right tools for the right job, and this is not one of them. So what would I do in this case? Well, I do something a little bit different. I'd start with a content aware move, and that might actually finish it. And then if not, I do a little bit of blending around the edges. Hopefully though, that gives you an idea. The structure is how much structure is maintained. We have 1 to 7, how much color is blended, with 0 being off, 10 being as much as it possibly can. That's the secret of the patch tool. Again, remember there are 2 modes. One's a little more like the stamp, one is the content aware, and then we'll try to blend it in. So by the stamp, that also implies like the healing brush, which means that you can do larger effects. And while it does work better than the healing brush would in certain areas, keep in mind that it's still relatively small, because if you had a really big one, it's blending the entire thing. And if you're moving a really big spot, you kind of want to squish in, do a little bit at a time. Oh, I've got the source on. In this case, I do destination. Just do a little bit at a time and try to like blur it out on a big one. And then once you've got it kind of cornered, and this is a bad example because it's actually so small, once you've got it kind of cornered, you would cycle through and get it. And a lower diffusion in this case would have worked better as well. But whoops, they toss it to source. Here we go. Kind of start blending it in, cornering it and blending it. Now, this again is a bad example for it. If you really wanted to do something like that, I'm terrified to touch her face, but let's do it one more time. Again, content aware move is better for larger areas like this. We'll be going over that next, but just to demonstrate the nightmares that you can create. Oops. Using shift to add on. Notice shift key is moving it to the add. The alt key I've clicked on the wrong area. There we go. The alt key will move to the subtract, and the shift alt will move to the intersect. Intersect just means wherever the 2 selections intersect, that's all that remains. Okay, let's see if there's not enough background now. So you can see we could try, but with this background cut off like it is, we're gonna kind of get like this weird nightmarish effect, but we can try. I'll start zooming in and grabbing it. And you'll see it's just some kind of horror show, some absolute monstrosity that occurs, because you really need the background to sample on. So she's also a bad image for this. That leaves us with maybe the field. I have a good feeling about the field. Now I need some cloud and blue, but I don't want that wheat. Oh, that's too much cloud and blue. And then it's diffused. So that's not a good one either. So what do we want to do in these sorts of situations? Well, we could refine the mask a little bit, but really the content aware move is where we want to go. Given that this is, oh, here we go. It's like the 12th time I've said that. I think it's time that we move on to the next video, content aware fill. Do keep the patch tool in mind though. It is very powerful. As you saw, it was able to remove the tree correctly and easily with content aware, and we're able to control it. A lot of times the patch tool can work better than the content aware in fiddly little situations because you can do those structure and color adjustments. And if you just need a bigger version of the healing brush, then just set it to normal mode and use it and you're good to go. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the content aware move tool. I will see you next video.